a Sherlock Holmes science fiction tale by Stephen Seitz, where basically I'm your future self! Oh, okay. I suppose that could be quite handy. How many Napoleons do I give this? Because then, if I don't have to review it properly myself, I can go home early. You are already home? Oh yeah. Oh, I suppose I might as well review this properly then. Alright. The story revolves around a young American woman named Cynthia Kenton from the 21st century. Now, Cynthia attends a science fiction fair which contains an original model of H.G. Wells' time machine. A break-in occurs, a robbery, at the museum with armed robbers. To escape from the robbers, she decides to climb in this time machine, which, unfortunately for her, actually works. It takes her to Victorian London, and her exact location actually is Professor Moriarty's house. Moriarty takes her prisoner and seizes her magical phone, which obviously he's very interested in because it's all, well, it's something he's never seen before, so he's fascinated by it. So he doesn't really quite believe her, but she's obviously a very fascinating woman, so he decides to keep her prisoner just so he can figure out what to do with her. She manages to get a note to the Baker Street irregulars who happen to be outside, and she slips a note through her window. And the irregulars take the note to Sherlock Holmes. Subsequently, Sherlock Holmes comes and saves the day. She persuades Holmes to help her again find her way back home. Holmes doesn't really believe her, but he decides to go along with it anyway. But unfortunately, along the way of trying to get this time machine back, she falls in love with Dr. Watson. This is a very unique tale. I've not had anything quite like this before, so it's definitely something very fresh, which I found quite appealing. It makes a lot of reference to a lot of historical events, including the supposed Versailles time slip, which is a very interesting tale in itself. And it offers a very interesting explanation as to how that occurred, and it actually makes sense within the context of all this. There is a moment where it does get very confusing, where when the first time slip occurs, and she goes back to the future, and it's not really clear why or how that suddenly happens. It's just suddenly she's gone in the future, and it gets a little lost at that point, but it eventually comes and makes some more sense again. So just watch out for that confusing part. There's a lot of references to Doctor Who, to Star Trek, so I think anyone with a particular interest in science fiction will find this tale quite appealing. There is obviously slight sort of pairing between Watson and Cynthia that goes on, rather perhaps a little too quickly, but then Watson didn't wait around, did he, when you consider Mary Morstan? I mean, it was like, meet one day and marry the next. Well, near enough. Is this the sort of story Arthur Conan Doyle might have written for Sherlock Holmes? Definitely not. So in that sense, it's very, very uncanon. So you have to sort of take it out of the context of that in the same sort of way that one would do with, say, 7% Solution, the film and the book. So it's not canon in that sense, no. However, that being said, there is a nice blend of canonicity splattered throughout. Little things like Sherlock Holmes' use of a plum in disguise, which I think is a nice sort of nod to a little bit Charles Augustus Milverton story-esque in there. The disguise he uses to get Cynthia Kenton out of Moriarty's confines. One that I particularly liked, canon-wise reference, we know that Moriarty lost his seat, his mathematics chair, for some shady, dubious reasons. Here it brings that up, but it offers a solution as to how that occurred. Basically, it's all tied into Professor Moriarty's association with H.G. Wells, or rather, Professor Moriarty was actually an avid believer of this time machine. You know, he actually wrote a theory on how it was all possible, but obviously at the time people just did not believe him, and he was in such disgrace he actually lost his seat from it. So I just thought it was quite nice to have that obscure little canon point brought up and expanded upon and tied into everything about the story, so I thought that was quite cool. Definitely the voices of the characters, how they act to one another, is really good. I think Holmes would be like this if someone came It's a little bit like No Place Like Holmes, but sort of reversed in that obviously we've got someone from the future coming to the past, and Holmes reacts how I imagine he would react to her. It's very in character, so though it might be a bit out of canon context, storyline wise perhaps, the characters definitely keep to their canon selves very, very well, so that is certainly achieved. The book is written in third person. It is spread across 14 chapters with 120 pages. What's definitely notable in the style is the excellent use of history. Stephen Sykes has a very good understanding of the Victorian class system, of Victorian women, Victorian way of life. He is very good with language as well, because remember, bear in mind, he is an American. Often some English readers can find a lot of faults with American written Sherlock Holmes works because there's too much insertion of far too Americanized sayings, especially modern Americanized sayings that Victorian Englishmen simply would not say. Stephen Sykes doesn't make that error. Obviously, the character Cynthia Kenton uses the phrases, but Holmes and Watson do not. What I also particularly like is Stephen Sykes' use of descriptive narrative, particularly about settings and surroundings. It really helps you imagine the rooms you're in. This could be a museum, Cynthia thought as she took in the tapestries depicting country life and medieval battles, the finely crafted furniture, paintings of pastoral countrysides and portraits of notables from previous centuries on the smooth emerald green walls. An elaborate tea service, warm to the touch, sat on the sideboard. Cynthia poured a cup to ease her parched throat. At the moment, the tall doors opened and the lean, reptilian figure of Professor James Moriarty entered. So it really helps you sort of imagine the whole scene and the setup. So he's like that throughout the whole book, so it helps build up pictures in your mind really well. Honestly, if you're prepared to go down the science fiction Sherlock Holmes route, this is definitely one of the better ones out there, because a lot of them are disastrous. This one is definitely on the top end scale, so like science fiction, like Sherlock Holmes, never meant to be, actually, probably meant to be for you to read.
Great Scott!